Good morning and welcome to Sree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. We have a great show planned today. Our guest, Jack Byers from MediaVillage and AdvancingDiversity.org, is a nationally recognized advocate for diversity and inclusion in media and advertising. Sree, of course, has hosted the New York Times Read Along for 5 years and is the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor at Stony Brook School of Journalism. For our medical segment today, we have a really special part of the show. Sujana Chandrasekhar, an ENT surgeon, and Marina Kurian, a general surgeon, will be joining us. They are the co-hosts of a new weekly live stream that will be airing Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, called She's on Call. So please stay tuned for that. Please make sure to share this. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Retweet it, mention your friends, tag your friends, bring them into the conversation. There is so much to cover in today's paper, a lot of news even overnight that we'll get to. And without further ado, I'm going to turn to our New York City cam and from Sree's building, not quite his apartment, but his building. Sree, we've got the view of New York City, right? We're
yes,
looking
we do.
We're looking at Midtown, I believe.
We're seeing Midtown and the Upper West Side, and we're also seeing a little bit of the Hudson River. There's New Jersey over there, and you can see, if I look down, there's a subway station, and look how empty it is.
And a sign of the times under coronavirus, no doubt. And to your right, we see a little bit of the Hudson River. That's New Jersey, right?
Yep.
So please, for folks watching, please let us know where you're watching from. And as I mentioned earlier, please share, retweet, or mention someone in the comments. The New York Times Read Along airs every Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time with a guest on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Let's take a look at who's watching so far. We have Diane Stefani joining us from Margate, New Jersey. Excited to hear from Jack Byers, and thank you, Diane, for introducing us to Jack. We have Anand Babu saying hello from Andhra Pradesh, India. We have Linda Lawrence saying good morning from sunny Long Island. And Patricia Freudenberg joining us on LinkedIn, saying hi to Sree and the New York Times Read Along team from New York. Anna Maria Verzi from Connecticut. Brett, thank you for joining us. I'm curious where you are in Connecticut. I went to school there at Wesleyan University, and my wife's family is from Connecticut. Of course, Jonathan Borstein from Union Square. Hello, Jonathan. Big shout out to my mom, joining us from Hastings-on-Hudson, New York. Hi, Mom. Angela Kendall joining us from Orlando. Paula Kiger joining us from Tallahassee. Paula is one of our producers, and we will be introducing you to them shortly. And another producer, Carla Baranakis, joining us from Jersey. And Steve Taylor saying hi to Patricia on LinkedIn. Steve produces our show on LinkedIn, and we'll be engaging with the audience there. We have Bob Veritoni joining us from New Milford, and Anna Maria is clarifying that it's Milford, Connecticut. Steve is joining us from his home in Philadelphia. So Sree, we have a lot of people watching, a lot of great folks, and a great team with us.
Well, great to see everyone. Hello, folks. Great to have you all here, and thanks very much to Neil and the production team for doing such a great job with the New York Times Read Along. It's been 5 years that we've been doing the Read Along, and in the last 2.5, Neil and company have taken it to a whole new level, and we have thousands of people who watch every week, and we're so grateful to the entire New York Times Read Along family. And we will be reading the paper, talking about what's going on. We have a great guest who will be joining us, and then we'll be joined by our two doctors. and their new show, She's on Call. So let's get to it.
Absolutely. So the first thing we'd like to do is to introduce you to our production team as Ron Thomas and Martin Englisher check in. Of course, Sujana Chandrasekhar is checking in as well. But first we'd like to do is to introduce you to the team that brings you the New York Times Read Along every week. So I'm going to bring in Paula Kiger, and we're going to find Carla Baranakis, Julia Weeks, and Steve Taylor, bringing on the full crew. Thank you, all of you, for joining us and for the great work that you're doing to help make this show such a success. One of the things that we do, one of the things that makes the New York Times Read Along so special is that we have a whole production team. Paula Kiger is in Facebook, responding to your questions and comments, dropping in links to articles, adding context to the conversation. Steve Taylor is doing the same on LinkedIn and engaging with folks there. Julia is our medical segments producer, and we've been for the last several weeks we have been including doctors on the show, doctors and nurses between 10 and 10:30 to answer your questions about coronavirus, COVID-19, and that's evolved into this really special show called She's on Call that we'll hear more about later. So Julia, thank you for your work on that. And a special shout out to Carla Baranakis. Carla Baranakis joined our production team recently, and really, I couldn't say enough about Carla in terms of the guests that she's been able to get for us as a former national copy chief for the New York Times. She has been a great source of support over the last several years. But some of the guests that she's brought that come to mind off the top, recently Stephen Greenhouse, Harlan Coben, Mickey Maynard, former Detroit bureau chief for the New York Times. But I also go back to when she took us to Susan Brownmiller's house, place in New York City. What an incredible show that was. So thank you, Carla, for all of your work there. And this is our team. This is our production team. If you would like to have a show, like for us to produce a show for you, contact us and we can put something together for you. Don't cancel your virtual event. If you're just doing Zoom calls, you can do it better than just Zoom. And this is the team to do it for you. So thanks, everyone. We'll let you get back to Facebook, LinkedIn, and other platforms, and we'll talk to you later. Of course, our guests for today's show, again, are Jack Myers, Marina Kurian, and Sujana Chandrasekhar, who are going to be joining us for the medical segment at 10 a.m. So we will bring back Sree and get going with the rest of our show. And we'll excuse Paula as well. Sree, the next piece of business we should take care of before going on with the show, recognizing our sponsors, right? So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll check in with some of the folks that have joined us since then, including Tim Sohn, Carla Platter from Cape Cod, and a few others. So our first sponsor we'd like to recognize is Muck Rack. Sree, would you do the honors, please?
Sure. I want to thank our friends at Muck Rack, Greg Gallant and Mike Schneider, for allowing us to pull together this incredible special course that we have put together. It's called The Fundamentals of Social Media. It's a free course, a free certification course coming June 17th. That's this Wednesday. Sign up right now, mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. My friend and colleague Linda Bernstein and I are worked on this very hard for the last several weeks and months to put this together. And more than 3,500 people have already signed up. mrac.co/social. Please tag a friend, take a screenshot, send this to them, tell your friends to sign up. And it's available to anyone of any background, any experience, any age. you'll learn a lot, just like I did putting this together.
Thank you, Sree. The next sponsor we'd like to recognize is Magic Bus USA. Magic Bus does some great work. They are based, Magic Bus imagines a world where children break out of poverty and lead fulfilling, rewarding lives, contributing to their community and to the world around them. As you can see, 7 out of 10 adolescents in India do not have a higher secondary qualification. 6 out of 10 youth do not have the soft skills necessary for employment. And 3 out of 10 girls are married before they reach the age of 18. In addition to Muckrack and Magic Bus, we'd also like to recognize Strategy Focus Group. Strategy Focus Group is a global team of human capital strategists committed to helping organizations solve people issues within your organization. They do that by working alongside you to solve your toughest problems and helping you capture your greatest opportunities. Thank you to, as Sree mentioned, to Greg Gallant and Mike Schneider from Muckrack, Pradnya Haldapur from Magic Bus USA, a former guest on the New York Times Read Along, if you remember from the Mother's Day edition, and Ron Thomas from Strategy Focus Group. Ron Thomas checked in earlier and is based in Dubai. Thank you again for all of your support. If you're interested in being a sponsor, please contact Sree Srinivasan, Sree@Sree.net, or myself, Neil Parekh, Neil@neilparekh.org. And we'd love for you to learn more about our sponsors. If you go to their websites, you can learn more, readalong.link/muckrack, readalong.link/magicbususa, or readalong.link/strategy focus group. And again, if you're interested in learning more about sponsorship opportunities, please feel free to reach out. So Sree, what do we see in the paper today? What are the front pages of these sections? I see you have the Saturday paper as well.
Yeah, I just pulled out the Saturday section so that people can see what was in the paper yesterday. The lead story, New York State moves to check police conduct. And here's a photograph of public support for protests like those in Brooklyn has led lawmakers across the country to consider police reform bills. From the boss, sign a waiver to go to work. Firms seek protection, employees worry. And black voters lifted up de Blasio, now they boo. Peru's virus strategy crumbled once illness hit. Fragile economy stalls as cities empty out. We do want to also show you, before we get to the front page, just a quick tour of the other sections. The Sunday styles, alone, together. For good or ill, the times we're living in have reshaped our relationships. We certainly know that. Here's a cover of the Sunday Review. I'm a Black American refugee. I had to leave the United States to find freedom. Very provocative front page. The Accused, review by Susan Choi of A Burning by Megha Majumdar, a new book, and the cover of the book review. At home is We're Ready to Greet the New Day. We're forming a pod to keep our family safe and sane. There's the Metropolitan section. Let's all agree to keep stoop culture. And this is the cover of the New York Times Magazine, A Path to a Cure, or The Path to a Cure for COVID-19. Arts and Leisure cover is The Institutions Are Still Not As They Should Be, and It's Crushing. Black Artists, White Stages. Real estate, still going strong. Building a life on free land. Americans past and present have claimed property through government programs. And the cover of the business section, One Bar, 12 weeks, 17 lives in flux. The staff of the Hatch and the bar in Oakland. And there's a special technology section called Fast Forward. Innovation everywhere. Undeterred by a pandemic or unrest, technology continues to transform all aspects of our world. So we've certainly seen how technology has affected everything that's happening in life. I also love this cover photo of Delroy Lindo, who is an actor that many people know. He plays a Trumpite on film. I started seeing Paul as a larger-than-life Shakespearean and Wilsonian tragic character. And he says he had to get my head around his Vietnam vet character in Spike Lee's drama, The Five Bloods. And I look forward to seeing if that's coming out on Netflix, or may already be out. So that's the paper, Neil.
And if we have time, we do that New York Times Magazine cover. We always try and show the video, the making of the cover. So we'll get back to that later in the show, and I'll rejoin you at that time. I'll leave you to the front page, some incredible stories, and even I don't know if it made the front page of the New York edition, Sree, but here in Washington, the killing of Rayshard Brooks by the police in Atlanta did not make, and I see it's on the front page there. So I'll let you cover that. And
before you go, Neil, let's talk about next week's show. We want everybody to come back for a Sunday's show next week for sure, and we also want to tell them about our special Father's Day offer.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and do that. Our special Father's Day promo, we're going to be doing, if folks remember for Mother's Day, we did a special promo where people had the opportunity to shout out their moms or the mother figures in their lives. We showed a picture on screen. We read out a short message, and I think that people we had 24 different messages that we shared. So you can find the information on that on digimentors.link/Father's Day. We will be sharing 50% of the proceeds to charity, and the charity for Father's Day is the Unusual Suspects .org. It was chosen by next week's guest. Next week's guest is Tom Jolly, the print editor of the New York Times. Sree and I were at his house last year in August. Sree talks about life highlights. This was certainly a life highlight for me to sit at his kitchen table and have him walk through the New York Times with us. Carla was there for that as well. That was an incredible event. So we're thrilled to have him back next week for our special Father's Day edition.
Neil, if you can go back to the Father's Day promotion we're doing, I want people to see the photograph that you've shown. There's me with my dad and a picture of you with your dad. I think it's very special. We should tell folks the story of how your father, a lifelong newspaper reader and fan of the New York Times, when he passed away in the coffin, he was cremated with a copy of the Sunday New York Times. And I always get goosebumps thinking of that and the legacy you're carrying on with the New York Times read along. And everyone can participate. Just go to digimentors.link/Father's Day so that we can pay tribute to a father figure in your life. It could be a grandfather, uncle, role model, male role model, anybody you like. And we'll read out the message and show the photograph, and half the proceeds will go to charity. So everyone, please check this out. We had 24 people do this for their mothers, grandmothers, and friends last time. You can do that now for the father figures in your life. So please check that out. And please contact me if you're not able to find this or anything. Take a screenshot, take a photograph. And now let's get to the paper. But just remember, next Sunday is also going to be a big show because we're going to have Tom Jolly here, and he's going to walk through the paper and how they put it all together. Please follow Tom at Tom Jolly on Twitter. He shares the New York Times print edition front page before anyone else, and you get to see that. So do follow him. He's terrific.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sree. I appreciate that mention. As you mentioned, my father passed away. I guess it was 11 years ago now, almost 11 years in 2009, and that we grew up reading the New York Times. It was a part of our life every day, and that was one of his last wishes, to have the Sunday edition in the coffin with him when he was cremated. So thank you for bringing that up, and that certainly will be something I'll be thinking about next Sunday. So with that, I will leave you to the paper and our guest, Jack Myers, who will be joining us shortly. Take it away, Sree.
Thank you, and we'll get to Jack in just a minute. Here's the front page of the New York Times, the lead story: An awakening in America is prying at racism's grip. Systemic injustices raised in boardrooms, classrooms, streets, and stadiums. Look at the number of bylines on this story. Terrific to see Amy Harmon, Apurva Mandavilli, Sapna Maheshwari, and Jodi Cantor writing that story. And here is some of the changes. NASCAR has decided to ban the Confederate flag, and those are things that you would not have expected, but here we are. And very important piece. 6 years after Ferguson, reform but little change. Nationwide efforts fail to end police killings. Infections rise in many states that reopened, and this was predictable and predicted by so many people that this could happen and will happen, and now here we are. Self-isolating at home in Russia with 20 others. Stunning piece of reporting. If you haven't read this, I read this yesterday online, and turns out that especially in St. Petersburg, there are multiple, something like 10 to 20% of the homes in St. Petersburg, Russia, are communal apartments where there could be 6 to 20 people in one apartment. They took the homes of aristocrats after the 1917 revolution and divided them up into apartments. It's a legacy of the Soviet Union. But among the great little details and sad details in the story is about how you're sharing a toilet with 3-4 other families, and how people will have a common toilet seat and they will hang their own toilet seat on a nail in the bathroom, and people will know which one to use when they're using the toilet. And just a stunning piece of reporting and capturing the mood in St. Petersburg, Russia. Please check this story out. I want everyone to read it. Big tech, eager to get bigger, seizes the moment. And that's tied directly to this entire section of the New York Times called Technology. And one of the photos here that's striking is how West Point graduates, this is the military academy, and President Trump addressed them, and he promised them they won't serve in endless wars, which I think is welcome news for everyone. At the same time, he talked about the importance of weapons and new weapons being inducted, even though they won't need the endless war. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes. He did make no mention of the various generals who he's a big admirer of, went out of their way to criticize him publicly, often for the very first time. All right, I think we're ready to bring in Jack. Let me see. Jody says hello from Florida. Ellen's watching from New York City. Let's get Jack Meyer in here.
Hi, Sree. It's good to be with you today. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. The first question I ask all our guests: how are you? Where are you?
I'm in Litchfield County, Salisbury, Connecticut, not too far from your guest in Milford. And I'm first of all, I'm very appreciative because I recently made the move out of Manhattan to full-time in Litchfield County, both my company and my wife and I. And the New York Times doesn't have home delivery up here. We seem to be more in the Boston circumference, which as a Yankee fan is kind of a new awakening for me. But so I really appreciate the ability to do the read along with you and to remember that great experience of reading the Sunday New York Times and waking up on a Sunday morning with breakfast. And here we can, instead of looking out on the Upper West Side like you were, which used to be my view, I'm now looking out at the beautiful countryside.
Well, it's great to have you. Great to have you, Jack. We want everyone to follow you on Twitter, Jack Myers Biz, at Jack Myers Biz. He's the founder of MediaVillage and AdvancingDiversity.org. Let's hear about both the companies, please.
MediaVillage is really the home for the industry, the full media advertising, marketing, and entertainment industry, to have a common place, a common home to come to elevate and escalate growth for the industry. It's a B2B site, but there's a lot of commentaries. We publish about 150 pieces of original and exclusive journalism each month, all for and about the media advertising, marketing, and entertainment community. AdvancingDiversity.org is the result of a couple of decades of work building into 3 years ago, the industry leaders coming together to create a collective fund for supporting those initiatives that are proven to be successful in making change in the industry as well as advancing business. So we have over 100 of the leading media and advertising companies supporting activism and funding of a dozen initiatives that have been proven successful around diversity. It was founded 3 years ago with the mantra advancing diversity from advocacy to activism. Particularly relevant today.
Absolutely. Look at the list of organizations that you have built. I'm looking at the paper here now. Speaking of diversity, dear white corporate America, this is a letter from Omar Johnson, founder of Opus United. I'm not familiar with this name. The Twitter handle is @Omar_Johnson. Interesting that you would buy a whole ad in the New York Times and not have a website address, just a phone number and a Twitter or Instagram address. Very interesting. Let's ask you that question, Jack. What is it like to be a white man in America promoting diversity?
Well, a white privileged older male. It's an interesting dynamic because one of the things that I've realized and that's been said to me by a few of my Black colleagues recently is that allyship, male allyship, white allyship is moot today. That it's not about what advocacy you've taken, what funds you might have contributed, but what are you doing right now to change the game, to make a true change. One of the things that we're doing at MediaVillage is speaking with some of our longtime Black corporate partners, companies like Bold Culture, Streamlined, Phil McKenzie, who is a longtime cultural anthropologist, who's been writing at MediaVillage. We're talking to them about how they can be more actively in the management and leadership of our company. And that's where I think every corporate American leader has to really look at how do we elevate not just Black Lives Matter, how do we not just elevate our advocacy, but what actions can we take that are based on proven successful results to drive diversity forward.
And I'm glad to hear from you the importance of white males and others being part of the solution going forward.
Not to interrupt, but it's white males is such an interesting construct for me. I wrote a book that was published 4 years ago. You mentioned Jodi Kantor as the author of the homepage. She and I had a conversation about it 4 years ago on the Today Show. It's a story of the need for men, and especially white men, to get in front of what became the Me Too movement. It was published 4 years ago. The book was called The Future of Men, Masculinity in the 21st Century. And I'm, reaching back here, it's a story that I think is more relevant today about how we cannot just be thinking that we're responding appropriately. It's just not enough. And we really have to reinvent ourselves as men and think about what that means in today's world, not just as white men, but as men in the gender discussion and the shifting gender norms.
Thank you. And I love that you have your book. As an author, we shouldn't be shy. Let's pull that book out again so people can see the title. We'll have you reach back out again.
Thank you. Men on Trial. 4 years, published 2016, written 2015. It was actually the first time there was a lot of research done on what's happening to men in society. There has been so much research on gender equality built on the growth of women, the expansion of women, the expansion of the women's movement, that more and more men are becoming feminists at the time, although there's been over the last couple of years a reversal of that trend. And this was the first research that was done on what's really happening with men. The fact that 60% of college students for the last decade have been men, graduate students across all the full spectrum of careers, heavily weighted more toward female graduates, core industries at the junior level being 60-70% of new jobs in growth industries going to females, all very positive trends. But what are the implications for men and for masculinity, and how do what we've seen with Donald Trump, there's a backlash among many men, and I think we're seeing multiple backlash upon backlash upon backlash, all conflicting with each other. And that's really what I study is how the media is responding to that and reflecting that as well as leading that.
Thank you, Jack. I want to just read one part of this letter. Again, I'm not sure who Omar Johnson is or what the story here is, but he explains a couple of ideas that are really important. He says that everything, that people call Black employees in the workplace creative, but just a kid, cool, but not a natural fit. They called me of it. Some said stick to urban marketing, not global marketing. Others said you don't have the skills to be a top boss. And we hear that kind of wording about African Americans in the workplace. And he also has this concept of having your own board of directors. I've been recommending that for years, that everyone should have their own board of directors, people they can turn to, not just one mentor, but many, many folks who are on their side and giving them direction and giving them hope. Here is a story about leadership right now. Defying science, Brazil's leader trumpets unproven cure. Bolsonaro is not just Trump light, he might be Trump worse, if that's possible. He is posting the God is Brazilian, the cure is right here, and he's been supporting the same bad science. And now more than 41,000 Brazilians have died, the second highest number of fatalities than any country after the United States. And I look at what's happened in America, and I think of it as an example of how the leadership matters at the top. Here's another unusual ad. Black America speaks, America should listen. And this is from AMG Allen Media Group, Byron Allen. Read more at thegrio.com. This here is this is the article about the former Soviet Union and what is happening in these communal apartments as multiple people share the same apartment. What is your take on the coronavirus story and how the numbers have spread and they're continuing now to come back, especially in America?
There's, speaking of that story, I do want to go back in a second to Omar Johnson, who by the way, has been head of marketing for Beats by Dr. Dre and a longtime head of advertising for Nike, longtime marketing executive who did that one-page ad there. So it'd be interesting to see whether that was his personal funding, whether it was corporate behind him. But nonetheless, it's an important message. If you look back at the 1918 pandemic, there are very similar patterns, although we're hopeful, obviously, that there are more medical advances and a vaccine sooner. But the economic impacts in 1918 were about 4 years. It started in 1918, about the same time in March. The economic impact, there was a second wave and a third wave. And in many ways, we treated it more seriously back then. More people were wearing masks. We weren't out in demonstrations like we are now. So the likelihood of a second wave and probably even a third wave is very high.
Here's an unusual story. Suit prompts Internet Archive to end program for free books. The Internet Archive, which many folks know, was offering something called the National Emergency Library and made more than 1.3 million books available for free for the nation's displaced learners. But it said it would close the library next week. It said that the vast majority of people who use the e-books for a very short period of time could be served under the organization's normal restrictions, which included limiting checkouts to 14 days. Fascinating. Also, Jack, you've been around and seen lots of things in your life. What do you make of everybody who's fighting to reopen? And I can understand small businesses wanting to reopen because their livelihoods depend on it. But these people who want the right to party and the right to go to bars and rights to get a haircut and all of that, what do you make of that?
Well, we're in the perfect no-win situation. If we don't reopen, the economy suffers and we move toward deeper into a recession and more than likely headed toward a depression. And I'm in the advertising media business, and I look at the economics, but I also look at the ecology of media. I think I'm the only leading practitioner of media ecology in the world today with an ongoing media ecology practice. So I look at the conundrum, but I look at it through the vision of how the media portrays it. And what we're reading every day is a no-win situation. You lose if you reopen the economy, you lose if you don't reopen the economy, and we have to figure out where's the win in that. You know, the article in the Times today that really got me personally is in the arts and leisure section. It's the Doug Brinkley interview with Bob Dylan, which is really a must-read, not just for anyone, but I'm a '60s person. Bob Dylan came into the world, you know, musically when I was a teenager in high school. And the interview is I think, really fascinating. By the way, one of your sponsors is Magic Bus. In the '90s, Doug Brinkley was a professor at the University of New Orleans and created a Magic Bus where he took students on a tour of history around U.S. history around the U.S. And I worked with Doug back then on a TV special. But it's really, and I just love to read in the context of that question. Dylan, in the interview, says, "Good news in today's world is like a fugitive, treated like a hoodlum and put on the run, castigated. All we see is good for nothing news. And we have to thank the media industry for that. It stirs people up, gossip and dirty laundry, dark news that depresses and horrifies you." And that's in the context of his talking about gospel news and gospel music, and how he really sees that as something that can give you courage, pace your life accordingly, or try to anyway, and you can do it with honor and principles. And so I think when we're faced with that no-win of opening or not reopening, of wearing masks, not wearing masks, of protesting, not protesting, we want to think in that context of the longer term decisions of what's it doing for our soul and what's best for our health, our heart, our souls.
Jonathan's watching and he says, haven't heard the term media ecology since the heyday of Neil Postman. And here is the New York Times interview. This, I presume, would have been the cover story in the arts and leisure section. And still painting his masterpieces, Bob Dylan talks about history, his surprising influences, his first #1 hit, and a new album. And there's young Dylan. Here is older Dylan. And here, just great photo here. I love this, of President Obama putting the Congressional Medal of Freedom on Bob Dylan. And this interview was conducted, most of it was done before George Floyd was killed, but Doug Brinkley, who did this interview, also called Dylan after George Floyd's death. And here's what he said. "I had a brief follow-up with Dylan the day after Floyd was killed in Minneapolis. Clearly shaken by the horror that had occurred in his home state, he sounded depressed. It sickened me no end to see George tortured to death like that. It was beyond ugly. Let's hope that justice comes swift for the Floyd family and for the nation." And for Dylan fans, here's a section about his health at the very end of the interview. "How's your health holding up? You seem to be as fit as a fiddle. How do you keep mind and body working together in unison? Oh, that's the big question, isn't it? How does anybody do it? Your mind and body go hand in hand. There has to be some kind of agreement. I like to think of the mind as spirit and the body as substance. How you integrate those two things, I have no idea. I just try to go on a straight line and stay on it, stay on the level." I love that, and that captures a lot of Dylan's music as well and his career. He just kept going, doing the things that he wanted to do, and wrote his own script and followed his own tune.
Great thing about the digital version of that is you can listen, you know, during they break, and you can go to YouTube and watch his new 17-minute song on the it's a sense. It is about the death of assassination of John F. Kennedy, but it's so incredibly relevant today, and it harks back to Subterranean Homesick Blues and the very first music video, really. But Neil Postman was mentioned earlier. My mentor, I was student of Dr. Postman at NYU, and he wrote a book called "Amusing Ourselves to Death" in the 1970s, 60s. Public discourse in the age of show business, and like nothing else, it predicted the emergence of a Donald Trump and the danger of a Donald Trump. This is a dog-eared, marked up, amusing ourselves to death. I'm very, and he was a mentee of Marshall McLuhan, whose name we don't hear often enough, who wrote really came up with the idea that the medium is the message. And with Twitter and Donald Trump, we certainly see that today.
Thank you. That's a terrific book. If anyone wants to understand American media history, Amusing Ourselves to Death is something I recommend to all my students. Here is a dispatch from Bangkok. This is about an elaborate wooden spirit house. And the most expensive spirit houses cost $12,000. Thailand, the average annual income is about $8,000. So that tells you something. And here's a story from Australia, right, about the kind of work that Jack is following. To Australia, recovery is largely men's work, stimulus plans suggest, meaning that the government is putting subsidies and dollars into programs that support the kind of industries that men work in, say construction rather than nursing. And they've been accused of sexism in this case. Have you read the story or know any thoughts on that?
I actually did not read that story. You know, what really stood out to me in the context of media is the response to the New York Times publishing of Tom Cotton's fascist op-ed. And I thought Michelle Goldberg has a really important op-ed this week in the paper, focused on both a defense of and a negative reaction to the Times decision to publish Tom Cotton. And the question comes up as to what is in the best interest. Is how important is it for us to know that people like this, with these ideas that they're willing to put out in public about taking the military force like Trump did in Washington and nationalizing that, and a senior government leader being an advocate of that. And the question whether that's something that should be repressed in the news or highlighted in the news is really a fascinating one.
And we did last week go into depth on that story. One of the things we do, we celebrate the New York Times, but we call it out when needed. We're an independent effort here. And it was very complicated story. And we urge people to go back in our archives. If you go to youtube.com/SreeNet, you can see the archive of all our recent videos that you can see. Also, my New York Times Read Along is our Sunday show. We have a daily program as well. And on the daily program this week, everyone should watch. On Tuesday, we'll be talking to Nick Kristof and Cheryl Wu Dunn. And on Thursday, we're going to talk to the chief scientist of the WHO. And so we call it Sree's Daily Global COVID-19 Show. Please follow me on Twitter @Sree, or go to YouTube and subscribe. The best way to keep in touch when we are live and we're doing these kinds of shows. Here's this cover story or of the national section about people who are getting these tattoos. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Really painful to see that this is what it's come to in this country. I'll just try to show you what else is in the paper. As a student of Nixon, Trump missed a few key lessons. With Trump, you get all the dark side of Nixon and none of the good side. And here is trailblazing Sikh cadet is graduate of academy. And this is a story of Anmol Narang. My grandfather was in the Indian Army, says Anmol. And Anmol says, adding that military service has always been a big part of her life. So this is a really special story to see a female Sikh cadet in.
The story on Nixon is an important one. I think we're missing a lot of historic context, both in terms of how Trump understands and uses the media as his ally, how the media uses Trump. But we're not looking back far enough in terms of guides and roles and focus. And I think we need to look back at the history of Mussolini and how he rose to power, because what happened in Washington a couple of weeks ago in response to the peaceful protests there, the Trump-led military force was a test, in my opinion. And historically, we've pushed out tests like that. Kristallnacht in Germany was a test of power. And what we saw was a military pushback, but what Trump saw was where his weaknesses were. And I think we have to really watch closely to see what happens to the military leaders who rose up against Trump, both the active and retired ones, and see how they're treated by the media, how they're treated by Trump, and what happens to them, and whether Trump begins pulling those leaders who were supportive of him and behind him, people like Tom Cotton and others, and see where they rise to. And that's the danger, and why media is so important, and how media reports on this is so important.
Thank you, Jack. Everyone, please follow at Jack Myers Biz on Twitter so that you can keep up with the work that he's doing. And I also want to give a shout out to anyone who's watching. Let's see if we have some comments and we can bring those on as well. We want to make sure that you are all getting to connect with Jack here as well if you have any questions. Carrie says context is essential. I agree. Historical context is so important. And let's see who else is here. Folks, check in. Tell us how your Sunday is going, how you're doing. We do this every Sunday, 5:30 a.m. on the West Coast, and we have people who check in that early, but we also have people who are joining us all over the world. E.B. Moss, Jack is giving good guest. I like that. That's a compliment.
Hi, E.B.
Yeah, E.B. Moss is terrific. She did a podcast with me in which she got me to talk about things that no one had ever asked me, no interviewer had ever asked. And so if you get a chance, check out E.B. Moss's interview.
We published that at MediaVillage, so people can go to MediaVillage, and you're there in shining armor. And you know, the interesting thing about tying this conversation back to what's happening right now with Black Lives Matter, the protests, is, you know, going back to the Bob Dylan, and as a 60s a person growing up during a time when we were activists for civil rights, we were activists against the war in Vietnam, and we really screwed it up, frankly, as a generation, the boomer generation. Capitalism and the goal for the upward mobility of our generation became foremost, and we set aside our nature. I hope my generation, our generation, steps up to support what's going on now aggressively, and that we re-emerge as activists again, and that the protests that we're seeing now continue. That this can't be just another moment, and by moment I mean a year or two or three. It has to be sustainable, and that's our biggest challenge. How do we scale this? How do we sustain it? How do we look at where the successes are and double down on them beyond advocacy to activism? And I think, you know, that's why the Bob Dylan article really resonated to me. An interview resonated because there he was in the 60s being a voice. How many roads must a man walk down? How many doves must sail the White Sea? And how many times do we need to go through this before there's real action? And that's where MediaVillage is, and advancingdiversity.org, at least in our little portion of the world, is really working to step up and take a leadership role in making sure that activism happens and highlighting where it does happen. And that's where I think the media has to be really responsible, is not just reporting on, but showing where the pockets of success are. And as Dylan said, we have to see where the good news is as well.
Thank you. Linda Bernstein says, I used to teach Dylan lyrics as well as Beatles lyrics in my intro to poetry class at Queens College in like 1978. And that was relevant then, it's relevant now. And Linda is my colleague, and she does some incredible work teaching with me, including the free Fundamentals of Social Media course that we have launched on Wednesday. It's coming out, and people all over the world are signing up. 3,500 people have signed up for that course. Just go to mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. It's a certification course. So at the end of it, you'll get a certificate. None of it is live. It's all asynchronous, but we will have a group gathering at some point. So do check that out at mrac.co/social. I also want to give a shout out to my mom who's watching on from Kerala, India. Love you, Amma. And I want to pull up Chris Gorman's comment so that I can read that out to all of you. Chris is a dear friend and he's someone who has encouraged everything we've done online to tell the stories of the world through the New York Times read along. And he also helped me get my first full podcast with CBS Radio. He says, if you haven't seen it, No Direction Home is an incredible documentary about Bob Dylan. It's on Netflix right now. One of the questions I have for Jack is, who has the time to consume all this media, including mine, that people are churning out all the time? There's such great stuff to read and watch. What is your advice to media entrepreneurs who want to get their work out?
You know, first of all, go back and watch West Wing. You know, there's so much. We really have to believe that over the last decade and for the next couple of years, we're in the new golden age of television, of content, because we're going to need a lifetime just to catch up on all the things that we should be watching. And the question is, what do you need to be watching right now that's the most fulfilling in a time when we're in our homes? Disney Plus is doing a great job in bringing some really good new content, but a history of great content for your kids. HBO Max just launched with a great library. They took Gone with the Wind off, interestingly enough. That's a story that I think deserves some conversation. It happened. There's not been a lot of conversation about it there. But, you know, what's new? What are people saying now? I really like to listen to hip hop, actually, because I think it informs what's going on. And that originated in Harlem, one of the few indigenous music forms for New York City. And so there is no advice. It's you know, what fulfills, what's meaningful, what are your needs right now? The library is full. We look at a lot of books behind people also. What can we be reading right now? What nourishes our souls as well as our minds? And I think the danger is using media, television, to go into a neutral zone, a zone where you can step back from the reality that we're all confronting. And I think the challenge right now that activism and Black Lives Matter is calling to attention, that the response to COVID-19 is calling to attention, is we have to step forward. We have to step into this moment and not try to step back and away from it. And we step into it by exposing ourselves to the range of things that are on media, not just the different news forms, but the different entertainment messages that are coming into the forefront, watching what people are connecting with, and seeing what's in that's serving our needs. With media ecology, we study the media, the history of media, but also the future of media, and we try to determine what's happening in culture, society, business, by seeing what's happening in media and how it's interpreting what's going on today in the context of how it's responded in the past.
Thank you. Jay says, that's why I started following the New York Times Read Along. Everyone, please follow the hashtag NYT Read Along. Follow me at Sree, follow at Neil Parekh, follow our wonderful producers. We think we're doing something very special at this moment, helping people understand journalism and media and where everything is going. Angela said that West Wing is my bomb in these terrible political times. I love that. I have watched a lot of the West Wing, but not all of it. But I think it would be helpful to watch it at this time. We're looking at the obits, and Vicky Wood, 101, who broke gender barriers and auto racing records, dies. Bert Dial, 93, a musician who dropped his bassoon to to snap special moments. So he was in the New York Philharmonic, but also took pictures, and because he had that special access. And here's Neil Genslinger, who has been a guest in the New York Times Read Along. And note to Neil, we need to get him back this year. I want to hear what he's been watching and reading, because he's a great culture critic and friend of the New York Times Read Along. Here we're going to take a look at Raising a Fist 52 years later. Oh, Carrie has a comment. Please do a story on Black Women United for Action, who created the first slave memorial at Mount Vernon. Well, Carrie, either on the Read Along or on my daily program, we'd be happy to consider that. Please connect us, Sree at Sree.net. And here's a story, still raising a fist 52 years later. Tommy Smith's iconic protest resonates as protests sweep America. And this is one of the all-time most famous photographs of Tommy Smith, 76, lives in Georgia and remains active in social justice causes. In 1968, Smith Center and John Carlos raised their fists during the national anthem in what Smith called a cry for freedom. I can't wait to read that.
The other piece that is worth pointing out is the review of Dave Chappelle's new Netflix special, which is not really comedy. It talks about the three main themes, all of which are stories that have to do with Black Lives Matter. And you know, that's an important trend to watch, is how the entertainers, the comedians, the late show hosts respond to this moment, and respond to this story, and where it is 30 days from now, 90 days from now, a year from now, and the impact that it had. And that's what's important to watch. And I think the way that the comedians treat it will be an important trend.
Folks, here's something that you will not see in any other newspaper typically, but maybe as part of a movement now, people are starting to do this. Support local journalism. Here's a newspaper saying advertise in another, spending advertising money and asking people to subscribe to their local news organizations. Very special ad from the New York Times. Our World Press Freedom Day and every day, we encourage you to find a local news organization you trust and support it. And look at that, the New York Times, support local journalism. Everyone wants to obviously grow their own subscription, but they understand their role in the media ecology, as we said.
Sree, get to jump in on the local journalism. At MediaVillage, we have two columnists that I think that are doing a really important job. One is Ken Harrington, former head of public information for the CIA and longtime CIA veteran, head of the Far East Station out of Tokyo for a decade, who writes an important column, a weekly column focused on how really what's going up, what the intelligence agency is thinking of and not saying, and how journalism is really not covering the behind the scenes in our intelligence industry. And then Eric Prince, a young, excellent reporter, journalist focused on the news media, is really focused also on local media and what's happening not just in local journalism in print, but also local journalism in television, how the 24-hour news channels that many cable systems are launching, the local news on your local television stations. Thank you for bringing that up, Neil, are really important. And I think both Kent's and Eric's journalism, I think, is some of the best reporting going on about the media today at MediaVillage. And that's MediaVillage.com on Twitter, by the way, at MediaVillage.com, C-O-M.
I was just trying to show Jack the 3 military helicopters flying across the Hudson River or down past the Hudson River. I just wanted you to see that. And here we are on a Sunday. It's now 9:30, and look how empty the streets are in New York. It is a Sunday. It is the summer, but there are usually people out and about, and we don't see them here now. Yesterday, my son and I had a family errand we had to run, and so we went in the subway for the very first time in more than 3.5 months, and it was quite an experience how empty the subway system is, and everyone was wearing a mask, and just so strange to see New York like this.
I heard recently that Google was going to tell its employees when they do reopen not to use public transportation, that instead they're going to be having their own buses and transport moving people around. So I'm not sure how you legislate that, but the future of our transit system, both above surface and below ground, is really a critical one that we're not doing much reporting on because they're dependent on fares for their sustenance.
We have 9:30, so we have about 25 minutes with you. Thank you so much, Jack, for being here and being part of the New York Times Read Along family. We were supposed to interview you, I think, back in November.
Yes.
And it's taken a while, but we're so glad you're with us. You get to pick where we go.
I appreciate your inviting me back after I wasn't able to do that.
You get to pick where we go.
Let's go to let's go to what's on TV. Can you do that now? One of the things, what's on Saturday, what's on Sunday. I was really pleased to see some kind of library. You talk about what's on television, but I want to go right to the into the arts and entertainment. Open it up anywhere in arts and entertainment that appeals to you, Sree.
There's the film section. Here is a story about the Van Gogh Museum, a new leader, but few visitors at the Van Gogh Museum. Oh, look at this. Look at them. By the way, these kinds of symbols are in the New York City subway also, where they want people to stand. And you can imagine that how crowded, like the Met, where I worked for 3 years, typically is, or even here, what happens at the Louvre, for example, in front of the Mona Lisa. This is the Dylan piece we talked about earlier. If you folks are just joining us and missed the Dylan discussion, please rewind as soon as we're off the air. This will be available in a recording on the channel you're watching on. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and on LinkedIn. Here's a story of opera, dance, and theater facing racism on another stage. And in the sports section, there was a reference to a fencing coach who was talking about Black people. And it's just amazing how people think that they will not be found out, and when they say things these days, and it still happens. If you haven't seen it, I recommend Never Have I Ever. And this is Mindy Kaling's new comedy, the first show to make me laugh out loud in a while. I've inhaled it twice, first on my own in a sleepless binge. The second time I did it right, live with friends. Our Netflix streams synced up across 5 states so we could discuss the show's brilliance in real time. And this is Nancy Coleman, a reporting fellow on the culture desk of the New York Times, has been trying in vain to complete a 1,000-piece Harry Potter puzzle that she purchased online in a moment of quarantine weakness. Here's what she would rather pay attention to instead. And she's talking about the various things she's reading and watching. What would be on your queue if you were doing this article?
Well, I've been watching Fauda. I've been watching. I'm going into the final season of Ozark finally. Shtizzle, which is an Israeli soap opera, really, but it's 2 seasons, and it takes the issues I think that we're looking at of how to respond to cultural realities and the shift when you want to change your cultural norms in a different context. But frankly, I think the most important thing is Spike Lee's new film, The Five Bloods, and as well as The King of Staten Island. Those I think are in terms of films, must watches for all of us.
Inside Yo-Yo Ma's soothing neighborhood. Fred Rogers taught me that space between the television screen and the child's face is sacred. Wow. So he talks about his phone, Scotch tape, animal stories, science, and sustainable developments. So sustainable development goals are the kinds of things he's thinking about. All right, where would you like to go next? We have about 15 minutes left with Jack Myers. He's at Jack Myers Biz on Twitter. Let's see. Jay says Fauda is another brilliant series. I also want to recommend everyone who hasn't finished Homeland, See How It Ends, which a show that we absolutely devoured in the time.
Great final season. Great final season. Really elevated itself, I think, into one of the, the top 10 series of all times.
Yeah, I have a top 10 series, Jack, that has like 25 shows in my top 10.
It's hard not to.
One of the things we've gotten to do, we've been blessed in the work we do at DigiMentors, our consulting business, digital media and virtual consulting businesses. We've been blessed to work with the great Steve Van Zandt. And you remember him from one of the top 10 shows of all time. Sopranos.
Yeah.
Let's go to the New York Times Magazine, because we want to also show you the cover and how it was put together. It's the tech and design issue of the New York Times Magazine. And the path to a cure for COVID-19 is the cover. And Neil has a video that showcases how this was put together. And this will also give me a chance to put down my phone and stretch my arms a little bit. And you can also relax, Jack, for a second.
From the New York Times Magazine, this is Behind the Cover.
This week, we have our annual Tech and Design issue. The subject this year is COVID-19. The cover story is a roundtable discussion with virologists, microbiologists, people who work at pharmaceutical companies about what it's going to take to get either an effective treatment or a vaccine.
We knew from the start that this would be a conceptual cover, and we wanted to work with Mike McQuaid. He's a frequent contributor to the magazine. We weren't sure if we were going to be able to get this idea in one image. So we wanted somebody with a real range of approaches to take this on and to experiment to figure it out.
Right. How we get from the point that we're at today to a successful, effective treatment. It's a long and winding road, and we wanted to try to capture that.
He tried a lot of different things, and one of the ones that we liked was a syringe that was tied in knots around itself. We like the idea of taking the instrument that you would use to administer the vaccine and making it really complex.
Even though the type plays a pretty subtle role on this cover, when I saw the type underneath the image, it's when everything clicked into place. It's a great example of the subtle but just unmistakable way that the marriage of type and illustration can crystallize a message.
What'd you think, Jack?
Well, I hadn't seen that feature before, and the way it comes to life, I think, personifies the way the New York Times has made a transformation into multimedia so brilliantly. The way they integrate across all the different platforms, and there are new technologies coming along that will enable them to put what's already been put on steroids onto a deeper injection of even more. To really bring the experience that you're doing here, Sree, to even more to life around the New York Times. But it gives me great comfort to see the print version. And my friends in Litchfield County, I know you have several of them watching now. I think we should create a lobby force to create home delivery here, because we don't have it. And that print paper makes such a difference to be able to open it up. And it's an experience that everyone should have. It's not like we're that far away from New York, and it's not like we don't have enough New Yorkers, especially now with more people moving upstate, that we should have home delivery. So maybe, Sree, with your relationships and with Tom Jolly next week, we can lobby for home delivery here, so we can continue to have the experience that you're and share it with you in real time.
Thank you. I think that'd be fun next week. Why don't you log in, watch, and comment, and we'll pull up that comment and bring it up to Tom Jolly, print editor of the New York Times. Everyone, mark your Sunday calendar, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. And here's a story. Here's a question they asked. What is the greatest invention of recent times? And I'll ask the same question of Jack in a second. The answers are, the question that were asked is smartphones, 62%, AI, 14%, self-driving cars, 3%, did not answer 2%, blockchain 1%, and CRISPR is 18%. This is very surprising set of choices here and answers from 2,500, 2,200 subscribers of the New York Times. What do you think?
Well, I don't think there's any competition. If the internet was 1993, Mosaic, the first internet browser. So that's, I think you have to be considered somewhat recent. And you think about the shift in culture as a result of the internet, the generation born post 95 who have grown up with the internet and mobile, who will have no active memory of anything before the internet, whose forms of communication, of gathering intelligence, the gender shifts, the shifts in gender norms, the shift that what we're seeing right now with Black Lives Matter, this is all because we're empowered by the internet, the global village that Marshall McLuhan talked about, all because of the internet. I don't think there's any competition, but that the internet, and followed closely by mobile devices, which are globalizing societies that don't have access even to electricity, are being activated by.
Here is an unusual ad. Your COVIDsafehome.com. Fall in love, be safe and happy. Contact us. So they don't actually tell you what they do. Let me ask you, Jack, do you want to guess what they do? I don't know. Do they help you make your home safe during COVID? Do they clean your home? Do they give you a new, is it a room rent? Is it a house rental business? Is it like Airbnb? I'm not sure what this is.
You know, I'm not sure either. I just bought from Hammacher Schlemmer a sterilization wand to go into hotel rooms. I understand in movie theaters now they're installing between shows, there'll be like a sterilizing steam that'll come down. They'll clear the theaters and will sterilize all the seats and the floors and the walls even. So we're seeing that in airplanes. So this whole the movement towards sterilization, I think is a business model that's going to be expanding exponentially.
Diane says, speaking of importance of journalism, do tune into Jack Myers' leadership conversations at MediaVillage.com with NPR's CMO Michael Smith on June 22nd at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Why NPR matters to culture, equality, society, and business. That sounds like a great conversation.
At MediaVillage.com.
And everyone should.
Unilever, Delaney Santos is not only their global chief marketing officer, but their longtime head of diversity and inclusion. So there's a company, Unilever, along with P&G, who are making a difference, who really have stepped up into the leadership role in diversity and inclusion, and have solutions that are working to create more diversity. 50% of their employee base, including its senior management, are female. They've made tremendous strides in cultural diversity, ethnic diversity, as well as for the handicapped and other abled.
We're looking at the interview, Kevin Hart, on how white America needs to help end police brutality. The highest level of anger and frustration should be attached to this. The problem, of course, is at the highest level of America, there's the lowest level of anger and frustration attached to this crisis. We also have the poem in the New York Times Sunday magazine, and we read that out loud every week, Jack, and so I'm about to do this here. Lion for Melinda Ward by Patricia Kirkpatrick. When the lion came through the camp, one woman sat up in her tent breathing the terrible smell. Next morning, the guy said no when she asked, then yes, but don't tell the others. Sleep in a tent, dream with creatures, the night breathes and stirs. If you wait before using a lamp, your eyes will adjust and you can see farther in the dark. How do you know? How do you ever know? And that's a poem, Lion for Melinda Ward by Patricia Kirkpatrick. I had the honor yesterday, Jack, of interviewing for the second time the writer Sapphire, whose novel Push became the Oscar-winning movie Precious. And she's got an incredible poem that she has written about lockdown. And she read it out loud on my other show, WBAI, every Saturday noon to 2 p.m. Eastern. And I will be linking to it, but you can find it on my Twitter feed. Or even more important, I want everyone to follow Sapphire on Twitter. Ms. Saff, MSSAPPH. Ms. Saff. If you just search Sapphire on Twitter, you'll find her. Please follow her. She's new to Twitter. So it's a way to encourage her to participate on Twitter. And Ms. Saf is her Twitter handle, and you can find her. Okay, here's the ethicist column, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Is it okay to dump someone because of his medical condition? We're going to turn you into an agony uncle here. Tell me, without reading any of this or knowing the circumstances, is it okay to dump someone because of his medical condition?
Wow. I suppose that depends on what the medical condition is and whether it's contagious and what kind of caretaker you are. I've learned in my life how to be a caretaker when I never thought I was a particularly good one. I think, no, I don't think for the most part it is okay. I think, but depending on the relationship, are you dumping your husband or your wife or your partner who you're in a long-term relationship with? No, that's not okay. But I think if it's a new relationship, you find out a medical condition you weren't aware of, sure, of course.
There's a whole Seinfeld episode about this, like there's a Seinfeld episode about everything. And
Exactly.
People should watch that. Here is a letter of recommendation. Someone writes in, David Rees says his realization was that his two favorite heroes in all of literature are Jeeves and Jack Reacher. Jack Reacher, of course, is the action hero by Lee Child. But I'm surprised to see that Jeeves is here because Americans typically aren't big P.G. Wodehouse fans. But I'm in being South Asian, knowing a lot about England, I'm a huge fan of P.G. Wodehouse and the character Jeeves. House of Pancake, sweet and salty, crisp and chewy. This Korean pancake is the food I've been craving. Samin Nosrat's piece here in the New York Times. Are you a cook?
I am, but not a particularly good one, but I try. And, my problem with cooking is I don't like recipes. I like to create, and sometimes that works out. Sometimes it doesn't work out. And, now it doesn't work out enough so that now I'm trying to read recipes and articles like that.
Got it. We're just looking at the New York Times Magazine.
Don't we all need to become cooks right now, Sree, with what's happening in restaurants? That's another of the conundrums. We love restaurants, but not comfortable going to restaurants. A good friend of mine, Michael McCarty, owns Michael's Restaurant in Santa Monica and on 55th Street in Manhattan. And, they've raised over $100,000 from their fans just to keep their employees financially sound so that they can all come back when the restaurant reopens. But in what context will it reopen? And will they be able to survive? So I think we have so many questions about the foundation of what we know, love, experience, and how it's going to return. I don't think there's a return to normal, and I don't even think there's a new normality. I think it's a new constant learning process that we're going to have over the next several years, culturally, business, economically, across all aspects of society and culture.
I couldn't agree more. Here is the at-home section of the New York Times. Look how quickly they put together a new section and launched it in the middle of the crisis. And honoring dad this year, keep it simple. Maybe you'll all get an ad for the father figure in your life in the New York Times read along and my daily COVID show ad offering that we have. Let's put that back on the screen so everyone can see it. And next Father's Day, that's coming up on Sunday in America. I don't know if Father's Day is the same everywhere, but we would love to honor your father, grandfather, uncle with a photograph and a message and maybe a group portrait of the men in your life that you want to honor. And we are asking everybody to go to digimentors.link/Father's Day and participate. We had 24 people who stepped up and supported what we were doing. And it was an incredible experience for me to participate with all of you. So please do join us for that. And here, 5 dishes to cook for Juneteenth. And Juneteenth is an example of something that African Americans know, but very few people outside the community pay any attention to. And this is how the world has changed, that 5 dishes to cook for Juneteenth is here in the New York Times. And
Trump was scheduled to go to Tulsa and have his, big rally on Juneteenth, and at least someone in his administration realized that probably wasn't a logical thing to do, to go to the home of one of the biggest racial, disasters in our recent history, and have a rally for Trump on Juneteenth. Doesn't mean he's not going to do it, and it doesn't mean it won't be in Tulsa, but at least he's not doing it on Juneteenth.
In my show, my daily program, we had the author Shamari Wills at Show Wills on Twitter, who came in to talk about financial equality and the lack thereof in America. And his book about the first 6 African Americans to escape slavery and become millionaires. One of them is from Tulsa, the story of the Tulsa massacre that took place, a place called Black Wall Street, that a white mob, jealous and upset about rich African Americans, decided to burn it down and kill hundreds of African Americans on the slightest of pretenses. There's no pretense that would be appropriate, but that's the place that Trump has chosen. He has moved it off of Friday onto Saturday, but it's still in Tulsa, and that is unacceptable. But that's the reality of Donald Trump. By the way, for this, during the quarantine, Tuesday is my night to cook dinner at home, and I've been using the recipes from the New York Times at-home section, and also remembering it's Pride Month in June, and there's a story in there as well. Make a game with your paper. Are you a crossword puzzler?
Oh, my brain just doesn't work that way. My dad used to, speaking of Father's Day, my dad would do the Sunday Times crossword puzzle and the Daily Times crossword puzzle in a pen. Not me, no. Father's Day is also the summer solstice this year. It's a moment in time that the world experiences together, the solstice, and it's a moment when I think we can hope for rebirth and renewal. And on Father's Day, coming back to the future of men, I think it's also important to pay recognition to those dads who are increasingly stay-at-home dads during COVID-19 and learning what it's like to be a stay-at-home working dad and mom. So I think COVID-19 is really Father's Day. It's an important moment to reflect on the last couple of months of experience for dads, both who are stay-at-home dads, whose wives are working, stay-at-home dads who are alone, and father figures who are learning a new experience about the at-home reality and that balance, that life balance in a different way. It's really an important Father's Day, and it's important that it's the summer solstice that it falls on, a renewal, a rebirth in many ways.
We're almost out of time, and Jack, you'll actually have to tell me the time because I don't have a clock here in the way I'm using my phone. So you'll have to tell me what time it is.
5 of. It's 9:50
okay.
Eastern time.
Okay, thank you. Here's a story I hadn't seen before. When black models were the toast of Paris in the Sunday Style section and the Sunday Review cover stories. I'm a Black American refugee. I had to leave the United States to find freedom. I have not read the story yet, but sounds fascinating. And this is about Tiffany Drayton, who is working on a book about fleeing American racism, and she's moved to Trinidad and Tobago. And so I'd be interested in reading that. So many interesting stories here, always in the Review. And this is where the story that was going to run in the New York Times, the op-ed by Tom Cotton, was supposed to run here last Sunday. Ross Douthat, Maureen Dowd, Nick Kristof, guest on my show this coming Tuesday night. So please tune in. Please follow me on Twitter so you'll know.
That's important. Nick Kristof is important given the context of Father's Day, and I hope you speak to him about the fact. I think it's 13. They looked at 13 companies headed by men and 8 countries headed by women, and the countries headed by women are actually doing much better under COVID-19. Far fewer cases and deaths versus the countries led by men. Interesting story.
Absolutely. And here is, don't leave the WHO, strengthen it. And I'm going to be talking at noon on Thursday, Eastern time, on Thursday, to the chief scientist of the World Health Organization. So please tune in for that. It's rare that I have 2 of my guest topics on the New York Times cover, New York Times op-ed page. And I'd love everybody to join us for that. And also please subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you get a sense of when our stories run. You get an alert, and you can also see our archive. Our 100th straight episode, 100 Days of Lockdown in New York, is this coming Friday. Tonight at 9 p.m. is our weekly Sunday show at 9 p.m. Eastern. Please join us for that as well. The Accused is the cover. A Burning by Megha Majumdar is the lead review in the New York Times book review by Susan Choi. I'm going to turn the camera around so I can talk to you, Jack. And before we say goodbye, I'm first so grateful to you that you would spend time with us here today. Just wanted to ask you a question.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you a question. This is a moment when so many of us are reaching out to our Black friends and asking them, what can we do to help? What can we do? Asking also questions about everything from Juneteenth to the talk, as they call it in the Black community. And so let me ask you a question, being, as you yourself described yourself as an older white male boomer.
Privileged.
Yeah, privileged too. And I, by the way, call myself a privileged, overeducated Indian American immigrant in this country. I wanted to ask you, what is it like to be that person at this moment? You're obviously very enlightened, very open-minded and everything else. But how do you explain what's happening in white America now? We're all trying to explain what's happening in Black America. And you don't speak, obviously, for every white person, and you don't want to, and you shouldn't have to. But just the way that we put our Black friends on the spot in interviews like this and ask them to explain Black America, explain what's happening in white America for our audience. We have a big international group watching right now who don't quite understand what's happening with the white women who are going out and fighting for their right to go out without a mask. The white men who are confused by everything that's happening. Talk about that a little bit. And I've saved the hardest question for the end. So thank you for bearing with me.
Well, we've got an overprivileged white leader who is sending all the wrong messages out. There's no meaningful leadership at the top of our nation today. So you have people who are frustrated, afraid, understanding that the fundamentals of everything that they've grown up believing was their rightful place in society, culture, business is being disrupted. The fact that everything men and others like me, Black, white, Asian, whatever cultural background, that whatever we've done to date isn't enough. It's not enough. It's not getting results. We have to do more. So it's not enough to be advocates. So we've got this juncture, I think, where we've got some people who are understanding that and saying, what can we do more? You've got others who are just coming on board being advocates saying, yes, I'll support that. And then you've got still 40% of America that's saying, I'm not buying into this. And I'm going to do everything I can to send the message that I'm not a part of this shift, this move. I'm back where I've always been mentally, culturally, societally, in my corporate world, and not willing to make that shift. And this is a pivotal moment for history, pivotal in so many ways. It's like when we went from the agrarian age to the industrial age, and there was a 30-year shift in that last 5 years in the early 1920s at the height of the last pandemic that led into the roaring 20s economically, and the freedom of the roaring 20s that led into a depression in the late 20s. So in 1929. So we're at this juncture now where I don't think we know where it's going to head. But if we look back historically, we see real negative for the next 2 to 3 years, real depression, real shifts, and real action. And those who don't take that action will not be around in 3 to 5 years. They'll be gone because, and societally, that 40%, I believe, it's either going to grow and we're going to be in a totalitarian society, which I don't think is where we're headed, or it's going to shrink, but there'll always be that 15 to 20% that are going to be disruptive, negative, and a part of society that we're going to have to understand, relate to, and find a place for in a positive construct. And I don't know what that is.
Thank you, Jack, for being so direct and so clear in your insights. We've seen Jonathan Borstein's comment here about Neil Postman. I also see Tanya has a very good comment where she says that fear, it's all fear of losing power, fear of who they are without privilege, fear of the unknown future. And I think that people have learned a lot here today. She also says anger is a cover for a lot of fear. And that's where we are. Well, I also I couldn't let you go without just commenting on your love of purple, because purple is my favorite color.
I do. You know, I have a lot in purple, and see, I'm looking at this, and it's more blue. I think it's my lighting, but you know, I had on the purple shirt earlier. I can't imagine what that would look like.
Let's see, what are your bands on your arms? What are those?
Oh, there's a little, you know, tennis elbow and computer elbow band. So,
does it work?
It does. Yeah. So does so does getting high and CBD. That works even better. But that's a whole other conversation.
That's a whole other conversation. Paula says we've learned so much. Thank Jack Myers, and we're grateful to you, Jack. Everyone, please follow Jack at Jack Myers Biz and check out MediaVillage. And everyone, we wish Jack the very best, and we'll look forward to having you back in the future as a guest, as a viewer, and certainly Father's Day, we'll be thinking about your book. Let's do one more plug for your book. Reach around and pull that out.
The Future of Men. Future of Men, Masculinity in the 21st Century, 2016, so published 4 years ago. First 44 pages are fundamentally a mea culpa, where I urged men to get out in front of what became the Me Too movement, saying that men have to own up to the realities of who we are, what we are. How do we protect the next generation, what we now call Gen Z, and the next generation after them and after them, to have better attitudes toward gender, toward changing gender norms, and also how do we confront what I saw as the looming backlash against feminism, which I think we're going to see a looming backlash against Black Lives Matter as well, and we need to be prepared for it and confront those people, not with anger, not with fear, but with knowledge, education. By the way, I'd like to invite you, Sree, in mid-August. We're doing a 4-hour summit on education and media education and communications education with a number of university deans from Annenberg, from Newhouse, and several community colleges. So I'd love you to join that and perhaps bring one of your colleagues from Stony Brook.
Oh, I'd be honored. Thank you. Please let me know. I give everyone my email address, sree@sree.net. We love feedback on this show and everything else we're doing as well. Folks, don't leave. After Jack says goodbye, we're going to meet our two doctors in just a minute. So let's say goodbye to Jack. Thank you very much for giving us this part of your morning.
It's been my honor and pleasure. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, let's now go on and thank our sponsors. I'm going to start by thanking Muckrack Academy for allowing us to create this very important free Fundamentals of Social Media course that starts on Wednesday. It's all recorded, so you can watch it at your own pace, at your own time. mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. Free certification course starts on Wednesday. Everyone, please sign up. You all know someone who could benefit. 3,500 people have already signed up, and now I know more people will as well. So please join me and my colleague Linda Bernstein as we put this together. Over to you, Neil.
Great. Thank you, Sree. We certainly want to thank the rest of our sponsors as well. And in addition to Muckrack, we also have Magic Bus USA. So I'm just going to say a quick word about Magic Bus. Magic Bus imagines a world where children break out of poverty and lead fulfilling, rewarding lives, contributing to their community and to the world around them. And as you can see, 7 out of 10 adolescents do not have a higher secondary qualification. 6 out of 10 youth do not have the soft skills necessary for employment. And 3 out of 10 girls are married before they reach 18 years of age. Again, this is Magic Bus, a nonprofit doing work in India not to be confused with Magic Bus, the television show that aired. They had both a show in the 70s and a new version that came out more recently. I made the same mistake as well when I first heard about Magic Bus, so I just wanted to clear that up. And then in addition to Muck Rack and Magic Bus, Strategy Focus Group is another one of our sponsors. Strategy Focus Group is a global team of human capital strategists committed to helping organizations solve people issues within your organization. They do that by working alongside you to solve your toughest problems and helping you capture your greatest opportunities. Thank you to Greg Gallant, Mike Schneider, Pradnya Haldipur, and Ron Thomas for their support of the New York Times Read Along. If you're interested in being a sponsor, please contact Sree Srinivasan, Sree at Sree.net, or myself, Neil Parekh, Neil at neilparekh.org, and we would love to work with you to share the good work that you're doing. Please also learn more about our sponsors through their websites. We have links that we'll share. You can visit them at readalong.link/muckrack, readalong.link/magicbususa, and readalong.link/strategy focus group. Thank you again to all of our sponsors for all the support that you've given us to make this show possible.
We have a busy morning today, not just this show, but our Digimentors company puts together web shows for other folks. And we have a show that's coming up at 11 a.m. Eastern. So let's tell you about that. It's a new show called She's on Call. And it's co-hosted by two of my dear friends who are physicians who've been on this show before, have been on my various shows. Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Kurian, both surgeons, will be talking to guests about a wide range of medical and health and other topics every week. Today, they have their debut show, and two guests, Dr. Dara Kass and Dr. Hafia El-Tahir, will be joining them. Please follow at She's on Call and the hashtag She's on Call on the various channels. And you can also watch the video live on Dr. Sujana's Facebook and Dr. Marina's Facebook. And speaking of them, they're going to be with us right now, and we want to say hello. We're just so grateful to them for joining us before their big show.
And here they are, Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Kurian. Thank you so much for joining us.
Very happy to be here.
Happy show day, guys.
Yeah. Yes. Very excited to partner up with Marina and with you and bring a dream to life today.
Tell us why it's called She's on Call.
All right. Go ahead, Suju.
Well, we were thinking about, you've done all these shows, 93 shows now, 94 shows for COVID. And we were thinking about all the information and the misinformation that's out there and how people are getting so scared that they're not able to parse that information. So we wanted to celebrate facts, and we wanted to celebrate women as physicians. And we wanted to talk about the fact that our lives as women physicians make us on call, not just for our patients and their families, but for our communities. And we really wanted to be able to share, of course, COVID information, but all sorts of health information in a rational, fact-based matter with people. And that was the genesis of this dream.
And please follow Sujana. She's on Twitter, Dr. Sujana ENT. That's her new Twitter handle, Dr. Sujana ENT. She's on Instagram, Sujana Chandrasekhar. Please do follow her. And her new handle, of course, is also at She's on Call. Let's say hi to Marina. Marina, how are you doing? How are things with your family? You were back in the operating theater after a long time. So glad to see that you were able to be operating again.
Yeah, I mean, I told my kids' friends were asking me like, how was it to go back in the OR? And I said, you realize that so many things define you in life, and I realized that I need the order of going to work, operating, and seeing patients. Like that really was the first 2 weeks on quarantine. I was, I don't know, wandering around my apartment, doing things just without like a true focus. Then I had to start making a list of things to do. So every day, at least if I checked off one box, I felt better. I know that sounds so sad, right? But I just was like, what's wrong with me? And then I just realized it's because I didn't have a structure to my day, and I wasn't going to work. I wasn't seeing patients. I was doing telehealth, which I think was incredibly helpful. And hopefully, Sujana and I can talk about telehealth, how it's going to, I mean, everyone's saying that it's really changing the face of healthcare and access, because so many times patients can't come to see you, but now they can do it from their own home, and telehealth will definitely be the future. But going back into the operating room is just so great. Like, it's such a community. You're working with your scrub techs, your nurses, the people who clean the rooms, everybody. We're just a team, our anesthesiologists, and it's just so nice to go back. And just comforting, and felt like, I hadn't been gone for 9 weeks. It was fantastic.
And I've learned so much from both of you, being on the patient side, just watching, a consumer of health information. And both of you have been on multiple shows, and you've contributed so much to the general understanding for thousands of people around the world, that when the idea came of doing a medical show out of our Digimentors brand, we were so excited to partner with you. Thank you for jumping on this idea. We want everyone to tune in today and every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Give these doctors feedback to what they're doing. There's an email address, docs@she'soncall.com, docs@she'soncall.com. Twitter is at She's On Call, and Facebook is also She's On Call, and so is Instagram. I want to ask Sujana a couple of quick questions, and folks, you can ask a health question of these doctors right now, or you can wait till their show debuts at 11 a.m. Eastern. I'm curious about, for Sujana, what is it like to be a working mother who also is a physician? You said you're on call for your community, you're on call for your family. I know you have a very supportive family structure. Your family members are often in your videos and things that you do. Talk about that a little bit. And also, what have you learned these 3 months of lockdown?
So thank you. It's really, one, I want to point out, you said operating theater. So obviously you would love PG Woodhouse, because here in America, we call it an operating room. But I love it because PG Woodhouse, as you were saying earlier on your show, is one of my favorite authors. Marina's right. I thought those first 2-3 weeks of lockdown were very difficult. Prior to lockdown, there was a lot of fear. So both Marina and I trained at in the days of the HIV crisis, and I immediately remembered the fears, the unknown at that time. Nobody knew who they could talk to, who they could touch. There were all sorts of scary stories going around on the subways about how you catch AIDS. And it sort of triggered sort of a type of PTSD in this fear, and my fear that I would somehow go to work, do what I love, I really love to do, and yet come home and transmit that disease either to my in-laws or my parents, to my husband, to my children. So I think in the beginning, it was really hard. We're also, Marina's right, we love, not only going to work, but having our regimen and having our team. And it's wonderful to be in the office, seeing patients. It's wonderful to be in the operating room, taking care of patients and being with our team and making our terrible jokes that they somehow laugh at. But what I learned is that we can serve our greater community, not just one-on-one. Like, this weekend, I was thinking about it. Our show, She's On Call, is premiering in a few minutes. And Friday, I got a call from a relative about a urinary tract infection problem for their parent. And yesterday, I got an email from a friend in town about their mother's neck hematoma, bleeding into the neck. And, I love that. I love that I can help people navigate healthcare and know what to worry about, what not to worry about. But then what I did during my time in between telemedicine and going back to work was I made some videos. I made some educational videos, instructional videos, to try to separate the wheat of what we know and what we're learning, particularly about COVID, from the chaff of all of the noise and the politics that really has no place in healthcare. I think I learned a lot about myself. I also learned that I still don't know how to cook.
Marina, what did you learn?
I learned that I can cook. This is why we make a good team. No, I learned a lot. I mean, I actually thought I would. I signed up for Babbel, and I thought I'd learn Spanish. You know, I understand some Spanish because, you know, I grew up in New York, and I think you can learn a lot by context, and I know enough of the words. I can usually follow. Like I can follow a lecture in Spanish, but I can't speak at all. And I actually have been the director of a meeting that is in Mendoza in Argentina, and my co-directors are like, Marina, when are you learning Spanish? And I thought, right now I'm going to learn Spanish. It totally didn't happen. I opened Babbel once. It's dreadful. I have to work on it. I do speak French and Italian a little bit, so the Spanish should be easy. It's just I just didn't do it. But I did, on the other hand, cook for my kids all the time, and that was interesting because here was a time when we were all actually home, right? So when the kids were little, I was going to work, I'd come home, I'd see them for a couple of hours, etc. Now the kids were home. It was a little bit different because I was home the whole time, and I'd be up in the morning, and they wouldn't wake up till like between 12 and 2, you know, and now they're, you know, teenagers and young adults, and they're like in their rooms. So it was funny that, you know, when they were little and they were like, mommy, 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 now they're like, oh, hey, Ma, how you doing? I'm going to my room. But at the same time, I was like, what do you guys want to do for dinner? Like, I really was doing all the things that I didn't do when they were young. And it was like a beautiful opportunity, actually, that I could spend that time with the kids and, you know, just feed them. Like that is a mother thing. It really is. I wanted to feed my kids, and I did, you know, and so that's how I know I can cook. I used some of the recipes from the New York Times as well. And then I was always a baker, so I baked a lot, and I learned how to make sourdough.
Wow. I mean, you're one of those people who've been baking up a storm. Mark says, I learned to make a good smoothie, but also a bad smoothie. He bought a blender, and so that's what made that possible. I do want to show all of you that I went out in the New York City subway system for the first time in 90 plus days. And I want to show you what the subway looks like for those who haven't been out in a while. Just look at that, the kind of a stunning photo of the empty subway. And here's my son and I. Everyone was wearing a mask on the subway in the car we were in yesterday. And it was just amazing to see how much New York has changed. And here is Little Italy. The only reason we did this, by the way, we had a family errand that we absolutely had to run. And here's Little Italy empty on a beautiful day, which never happens. And also we saw this say their names on the wall. And that's one of the things we do on our daily show. We say their names. And we also saw how complicated it is to try and understand what's happening in New York City. And I want to show you one last picture from the famous Katz's Deli, where, you know, home of the giant pastrami sandwiches, and it was completely empty inside, something you've never seen. We stood in that line for an hour and a half with all the tourists, but we were able to go out. This was not the family errand, by the way, to get to Katz's, but we had to. You may know that that's where Harry Met Sally was filmed, and there is a sign there. This is where Harry met Sally. Hope you have what she had. You know that famous line, and you know that Billy Crystal's mom is the older woman who says that, as Ms. Meg Ryan is pretending to show how happy she can be, let's say, in some circumstances. Before we go and let you get ready for your big show, we are so excited for both of you. We have a whole team that works behind the scenes with you to produce this. And one of the things that I want to tell people is that if you're like me, you know of surgeons only from having obviously been operated on yourself, or from the movie Malice, where a young, gorgeous Alec Baldwin talks about the mentality of surgeons. And I know both of you are familiar with that famous line where he is asked about the God complex of some surgeons, and I presume some male surgeons. And he says, you know, I don't have a God complex. I am God. And so when I got into
going into business with both of you. I was like, my God, 2 surgeons, how is this going to be? But it was fantastic. You folks have been have taken great direction from our team of Rose Horowitz and Vandana Menon and Julia Weeks, and just it's been such a cooperative effort. But talk about that surgeon mentality, because even though it was an exaggeration and you're rolling your eyes, Sujana, just like your kids do to you, there is something about it, because that's what makes it possible for you to go in and cut up human beings and make them better and heal them.
We put them back. We cut out the bad things. And we put them back together. That's the thing. It's a creative process.
But it takes a level of confidence and almost hubris to say, I can change you and help you. But I think without the humility, the best surgeons are the humble ones. The best surgeons are the ones who know their skill set, know their minds, know their hands, know how to put that together, but are in the context. So when, Sree, when you said, we took direction from your incredible team, we do that all the time. We operate in teams all the time, whether we are in teams seeing patients in the hospital, whether we're working with our medical assistant or our nurses in the office, getting the input from our front desk. How was this person when they walked in? Really cherishing other people's opinions. And certainly in the operating room, what Marina said, going back home to the operating room with our scrub techs and our nurses. And she's right, the people who clean, our anesthesiologists, the head nurses who come by to make sure everything's okay. We are a great surgeon, cares very much about what they're doing, cares very much about the patient, knows that they're smart, knows that they're capable, but knows that they are in fact not God. And they are doing amazing work within a team construct.
Marina?
Yeah, the team is the key. I think, we might take our team for granted. And Sujana will know, sometimes when you don't have your usual staff in the room and everything doesn't flow as smoothly, you really appreciate the team. But I think teamwork is really the basis of all of medicine. I mean, we cannot do anything without our nurses, our nurse practitioners, our PAs, our residents. And we also really rely on a lot of the other staff in the building to make the hospital run. So we are all about teamwork. And I think, if we take an example from the airline industry where they, no one can be so sure that they don't have checks, right, balances. And that's what we do also in medicine. If we're so sure about something and everyone else isn't sure, you have to kind of look at it and be like, well, maybe this is not the right answer or right process, and so you have to rethink it. We don't always have group think though. When we as a surgeon, people do look to us to lead, and that is why, as Sujana said, we have to have that level of confidence and know what we're doing. But also, we're so well trained to do that. Our training is anywhere from 5 to 10 years. I did several fellowships. I'm really well trained. And that is what you fall back on when you encounter something new or something unusual. And that happens to all of us. All of a sudden, we're like, hey, look at this. I did a really interesting, complicated case the other day, and you had to pull in, I was in I'm always in the belly when I'm operating. But this was like an unusual position, and I really had to track where all the anatomy was. And so in my mind, I was already like doing like a 3D layer of, okay, the artery's here, this is going to be that, and had to keep all the big bad structures in my head as well. And so that's part of our process when we're operating, and our training and everything we learned really comes into flow. I like to think also that most surgeons are extremely good anatomists. So anatomy was like one of my favorite. I loved anatomy. And so that is a really great fallback for me, especially when I'm in an unusual place where I'm not usually.
Yep, go back to our roots. And our roots are being well educated, having spent our entire 20s and most of our beginning of our 30s learning, and keep applying it.
Well, we are just a few minutes away. We're going to be.
That's so funny. It's so true.
Also dancing, also out dancing, but mostly learning.
We want to remind everyone that in about 25 minutes, please tune in to She's on Call on Facebook, on Twitter, and on these doctors' personal channels on Facebook, and you will be able to see their debut show, She's on Call, Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern. Please follow them, please support them. And they have two fabulous doctors who will be joining them on the debut show, Dr. Dara Kass and Dr. Hafia El Tahir. They're going to be fantastic, and you're all going to learn just as I am. I'm going to be behind the scenes pushing some buttons, but mainly just learning from these women. I also want to say that one of the things that I'm always thinking about is when you think about surgeons, we mentioned Alec Baldwin or Hawkeye Pierce, Alan Alda in MASH. I'm trying to name female surgeons that we have seen in fiction in any prominent way. I didn't watch Grey's Anatomy. Maybe there was one in there. Maybe there was one in ER. Maybe the doctors know of famous female surgeons in popular culture, but I just can't picture that. And this is why we need this show where we're hearing from diverse voices, female voices in a line of work that isn't often associated with women. So we'll give you each a final word and get you on your way to doing your big show.
Go ahead, Sujana.
So thank you so much for having Marina and me individually on your shows in the past. Thank you so much for the New York Times read along. It is really a fun way to read the Sunday paper. Your guests are amazing. Thank you, Marina, for coming on this adventure with me. And I'm really looking forward to what's going to happen at 11.
I would say absolutely the same things. Both Sree and Sujana, you guys, kind of discussed, and then we're like, we want to invite somebody else, and they were like, would you consider? And I was like, yeah, always. I mean, I do a radio show, but I was like, okay, no, I want to be with Sujana and do this. How spectacular will be that to work with a close friend for years, two close friends, actually. I think everybody already knows. We always talk about it, right, Sree, when we're each on individually that we've known each other since childhood. And so this is just, it's a pleasure. I think the show format's going to be really entertaining. I'm really looking forward to having people join us and looking forward to the questions that they pose, because I think that's one thing that Sujana and I do really well, which is we're able to explain complicated medical lexicon to people and they understand what we're saying. And I think that's an important aspect of why our patients love us, and that why we've both been separately successful in our careers.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to work with you. And we were all children just 25 years ago. That's the amazing part, and that's the special thing. We want to say that I've been asking, I challenged people to give us names of female surgeons who are in pop culture or on TV, and even obviously real surgeons also. And we've come up with one that ER did have a doctor named Elizabeth Corday, and that's where we've gotten. So this is why we want young women and young men and older men and women to learn from you that surgery, and just doctors who can give us great information can be looking like you folks do. And we have, again, the card. We'll show the card in just a minute, but we'll let you say goodbye and go off to your show.
And by the way, I want to say, and I think I told you this before, I went into medicine because of Hawkeye Pierce. I am Hawkeye Pierce, except for the womanizing, okay? But I was like, yes, I'm going to be that person.
And I should tell you that one of the blessings of my life is that at Stony Brook School of Journalism, I'm in the same pod of the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science, and I get to work with the team there on the ideas that Alan has. Alan loves science. Alan's very active, and he's funded the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science, and it's a blessing to be in the same pod and think about where things go in terms of communicating science. Of course, that's all become even more important now in this time and age. And Radian says, Dr. Beverly Crusher on Star Trek, The Next Generation.
Oh, yes, Dr. Crusher.
Tricorder. I want a tricorder.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we got to let you go. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much.
Everyone tune in. She's on call, 11 a.m. Eastern. And you can find She's on Call on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, and do find them and please follow them. They'll also be bringing on Dr. Dara Kass and Dr. Hafia El Tahir. And this is the kind of diverse, strong female voices that they will have on the show. Occasionally, they will also be bringing on male experts, but the focus is on giving out great information in a timely manner. And please tune in. And that's our show over here on the New York Times Read Along, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time next Sunday. Tom Jolly, the print editor of the New York Times, will be here. I am so excited about that show as well. She's on Call, my show at 9 p.m. tonight. Please join us. But here's Tom Jolly, print editor of the New York Times, next Sunday, Father's Day. And don't forget our special Father's Day promotion. You can, on the same show as Tom Jolly will be, you can give a shout out to your father or uncle, grandfather, any father figure in your life. Go to digimentors.link/Father's Day, digimentors.link/Father's Day, and you can have a picture of your father, grandfather, uncle, role model read out. And what a great gift this will be. And half the proceeds will go to a charity of Tom's choosing. So please check this out. Email me if you're confused about any of this, Sree@Sree.net. There's someone in your life that you want to give a shout out to. This is such an inexpensive and special way of doing it. We had 25 mothers for Mother's Day that were honored by their husbands, children, grandchildren. Make sure you don't miss out on this opportunity to give a shout out to a male figure in your life. And Sudha says, good luck for She's on Call. Mark says, amazing show as always. Courtney says, great show. We want everyone to watch She's on Call, please. And that starts at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And with that, we're going to say goodbye. Thank you very much, everybody. Please email me, Sree@Sree.net, if you have any questions, feedback, or if you need any help with your business, any virtual events. Don't cancel your conference without talking to me and my team at Digimentors. Goodbye, everybody.